This may seem like ordinary footage of an inmate in a prison cell, but no. This video shows billionaire drug lord El Chapo making his escape from the maximum security Altiplano prison. It was the most secure facility in Mexico for the most dangerous criminals. Let's find out how El Chapo managed to fool the authorities multiple times during his narrow escapes from the clutches of the authorities.
Tunnels. Through a tunnel.
Used by El Chapo.
Tunnel King.
The master of tunnels.
El rey de los túneles.
Prince of tunnels.
El Chapo had been running the Sinaloa cartel since the late 1980s after the arrest of his mentor, Miguel Ángel Felix Gallardo. Under El Chapo's leadership, the cartel expanded into trafficking cocaine, marijuana, and heroin, generating billions of dollars in revenue. By 1993, the Sinaloa cartel was a major player in the Mexican drug trade. El Chapo was arrested for the very first time on June 9, 1993, in Guatemala following a massive manhunt. He was detained along with his alleged lover and 4 other companions near the Mexican border. The arrest came after the murder of Mexican Cardinal Juan Jesus Posadas Ocampo, which was mistakenly attributed to El Chapo by the Tijuana cartel. El Chapo was extradited to Mexico and imprisoned at the Puente Grande prison in Jalisco, Mexico. This arrest marked the beginning of a long and tumultuous period of imprisonment, escapes, and manhunts that would continue for over 2 decades. Despite being locked away, he continued to run his drug empire from within the prison walls with ease. El Chapo would leverage his connections and bribes to maintain control over his men from behind bars. And don't be fooled. His lifestyle inside the prison was of extreme comfort and luxury, thanks to the patronage of Damaso Lopez Nunez, the deputy director of security who had taken over in 1999. El Chapo would shower Damaso with gifts and cash, ensuring that his needs were met and his influence extended throughout the prison. El Chapo enjoyed good food, women, and even volleyball, which he played regularly. He was known to throw parties and visit his mother, who lived nearby. Even his wives would frequently visit him. Despite his comfortable prison life, El Chapo was determined to maintain his grip on the drug trade. He continued to oversee the Sinaloa cartel's operations, using his network of loyal associates to manage the flow of drugs. His men were loyal and well paid, ensuring that his business continued to thrive even from behind bars. El Chapo's communication with his men was a masterclass in secrecy and deception. He used a complex network of messengers and intermediaries to convey his instructions, often relying on local farmers and other associates to transport drugs and messages. Inside the prison, El Chapo had a network of loyal associates who worked for him. These included prison guards and officials who were either bribed or intimidated into doing his bidding. His most trusted ally was Damaso, who ensured that El Chapo's needs were always met. El Chapo's ability to grow his business while in prison was a remarkable feat. He continued to expand his operations, moving cocaine, marijuana, and heroin, and even diversifying into methamphetamine. His profits were staggering, and he used his wealth to buy influence and maintain his power. By all means, El Chapo was living the life he wanted, but all of this soon came to a striking halt. In 2001, El Chapo decided to escape from Mexico's Puente Grande maximum security prison. This decision was prompted by a significant change in the Mexican government's stance on extraditing Mexican nationals to the United States. January 18, 2001, the Mexican Supreme Court ruled that the United States could extradite Mexican prisoners, including El Chapo, as long as the death penalty was taken off the table. This ruling sent shockwaves through the prison, and El Chapo knew that he had to act quickly to avoid being extradited and facing a life sentence in a U.S. prison. El Chapo was terrified of the prospect of being locked away in a U.S. prison, where he could lose control over his drug empire and be unable to coordinate drug shipments or give instructions to his men. He knew that if he was extradited, his grip on the cartel would weaken, and his rivals would seize the opportunity to take over his operations. This fear drove him to plan his daring escape from Puente Grande. El Chapo's escape plan was meticulously orchestrated. He bribed a small group of officials, including a prison guard known as El Chito, to ensure that his plan remained secret. He also threatened the lives of anyone who could reveal his plan, ensuring that his accomplices remained silent. On January 19, 2001, El Chapo put his plan into action. He was smuggled out of the prison in a laundry cart and rolled to freedom by El Chito. The exact details of the escape remain disputed, with some claiming that El Chapo walked out of the prison in a stolen guard uniform, rather than being hidden in a laundry cart. The authorities were caught off guard, and it took them some time to realize that El Chapo had escaped. Once they discovered his absence, a massive manhunt was launched to recapture him. El Chapo, however, had a head start. He had planned his escape carefully, arranging a series of getaway vehicles to be in place for his jailbreak. He made his way to Sinaloa, where he was welcomed back by his loyal followers and allies. In Sinaloa, El Chapo began to rebuild his empire, purchasing drugs from local farmers and using his wealth to buy influence and support among the local population. His escape in 2001 marked the beginning of a new chapter in his life as a fugitive. He would go on to evade capture for over a decade, expanding his drug empire and solidifying his position as the most powerful drug trafficker in Mexico. After his escape, El Chapo's first priority was to re-establish his network of loyal associates and allies. He was aided by his right-hand man, Ismael El Mayo Zambada Garcia, who had been a key player in the Sinaloa cartel since its inception. El Mayo was instrumental in helping El Chapo regain control of the cartel, and the two men worked together to expand their operation and increase their profits. El Chapo's drug empire was thriving, with cocaine, marijuana, and heroin being smuggled into the United States and other countries. He had a vast network of distributors and dealers, and his organization was known for its efficiency and ruthlessness. He was involved in numerous battles with rival cartels, and his organization was responsible for the deaths of hundreds of people. Despite the danger, El Chapo remained a powerful and feared figure, and his drug empire continued to thrive. During this time, El Chapo married his third wife, Emma Coronel Ayaspiro, a young woman from a prominent Sinaloan family. The couple had 2 children, a son named Johan and a daughter named Bertha. El Chapo also had several other children from previous relationships, bringing his total to at least 7 children. El Chapo lived in various safe houses and hideouts throughout Sinaloa, often moving between them to avoid detection. He had a network of loyal associates who helped him maintain his secrecy, and he was known to use fake identities and disguises to evade capture. But still, the authorities were onto him. In 2001, Mexican authorities were determined to recapture El Chapo. They were using a combination of surveillance and undercover operations to track his movements and locate his hideouts. One of the key resources used by the authorities was a close network of informants and cooperating witnesses within the cartel. These individuals provided valuable information about El Chapo's operations, including the names of his associates and the locations of his safe houses. The authorities also used advanced surveillance technology, including satellite imaging and GPS tracking, to monitor El Chapo's movements and identify his hideouts. They were able to track his location to a safe house in Sinaloa, Mexico, the house which had been used as a hideout by El Chapo and his associates. Authorities surrounded the safe house and started breaking down the doors in order to arrest him. They were 100% sure that El Chapo was hiding in there and could even sense movement inside the house. But when authorities finally managed to break into the house, there was no sign of him. It's as if everyone inside the house had simply vanished. After carefully searching the house, police realized that El Chapo had managed to slip away through a tunnel beneath the bathtub in his bathroom. This was a carefully designed escape route, as the tunnel could only be accessed by entering a small pin into a hole behind the bathroom mirror. The tunnel, which was approximately 10 meters long, was dug by El Chapo's associates and led to a network of underground passageways that allowed him to escape undetected. It was carefully constructed to avoid detection, with a hidden entrance beneath the bathtub and a ventilation system to prevent detection by the Marines. El Chapo had been aware of the Marines' presence and had been preparing for the possibility of an escape. His associates had dug the tunnel over several days, using a combination of manual labor and machinery to create the passageway. On the day of the escape, El Chapo was hiding in the safe house with several of his associates. As the Marines closed in, El Chapo gave the signal for his associates to make a break for the tunnel. They quickly made their way to the bathroom, where El Chapo was waiting. He took off his clothes and put on a pair of pants and a shirt, then climbed into the tunnel. The tunnel was narrow and claustrophobic, but El Chapo moved quickly and efficiently, using his knowledge of the passageway to navigate the twists and turns. He emerged on the other side of the house, where he was met by a group of his followers who had been waiting for him. The Marines who had been searching the house were unaware of El Chapo's escape. They continued to search the house, but El Chapo was long gone. Having made his way to a meeting point where he would be picked up by his associates, The tunnel beneath the bathtub became a legendary part of El Chapo's escape story. It was a reminder that even in the most secure of situations, El Chapo was always one step ahead of his enemies. El Chapo's escape was a major embarrassment for the Mexican authorities, who had been tracking him for several days. But the authorities were still in hot pursuit and kept trying to locate his hideout. Finally, they were able to locate El Chapo in the mountains of Sinaloa, where he was living with a group of his loyal associates. So on February 22, 2014, merely a few days after his legendary escape, a team of Mexican Marines, supported by the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration, launched a raid on the hideout. El Chapo was caught off guard and was unable to escape. He was caught hiding away in the Miramar City Hotel from where he was arrested and taken into custody. This marked the end of his 13-year run as a fugitive. El Chapo was arrested with several of his associates, including Ismael El Mayo Zambada Garcia. The authorities also seized a large quantity of drugs, weapons, and cash from the hideout. The arrest was also a significant victory for the U.S. government, which had been working closely with the Mexican authorities to track down El Chapo and bring him to justice. After being taken into custody by Mexican authorities, El Chapo was held at the Altiplano Mexican Security Prison in Almoloya de Juarez, State of Mexico. The prison was known for its high security measures and was considered one of the most secure in Mexico. El Chapo was treated as a high-priority prisoner and was held in a special cell designed to prevent him from escaping. The cell was equipped with advanced security features, including cameras, alarms, and reinforced walls and doors. This was also kept under close surveillance by a team of guards and was subject to regular searches and checks. There was a camera on him at all times, but the only blind spot happened to be behind the shower, where there was a narrow wall built for privacy. Now, El Chapo was in constant communication with his lawyer and his wife Emma. They were the only ones allowed to visit him in prison. El Chapo feared for his extradition to the United States and wanted to escape from prison. But with the constant surveillance and monitoring, the question was how. Again, El Chapo's associates thought of using a tunnel to escape, but how would they know which cell was El Chapo's? This problem was cleverly solved using a GPS watch given to El Chapo by his wife, who used to visit him in prison. The police did not suspect such a small device could help the prisoner escape. But this tiny device let his associates pinpoint exactly where to dig the tunnel opening, which was behind the shower wall, the only blind spot from the surveillance cameras. His associates began by digging a tunnel from the prison to a location outside the prison walls. They knew that the tunnel had to be long enough to allow El Chapo to escape undetected, so they decided to dig a tunnel which was over a mile long. This tunnel was also dug using manual labor and machinery. His loyal followers worked tirelessly, digging through the dirt and rock to create a passageway that was large enough for El Chapo to fit through. They also installed a ventilation system and a lighting system to ensure that the tunnel was safe and easy to navigate. El Chapo's men knew that the tunnel had to be hidden from view, so they dug it in a location that was difficult to access. They chose a spot that was near the prison's sewage system, knowing that the smell of sewage would help to mask the smell of the tunnel. The tunnel took several months to dig, with the associates working in shifts to complete the task. They faced many challenges along the way, including the risk of being discovered by the prison guards. However, they were determined to get El Chapo out, and they were willing to take risks to make it happen. Finally, the tunnel was complete and El Chapo was ready to make his escape. El Chapo wanted to escape on July 4, 2015, as a direct insult to the United States, but his escape was postponed till July 11th. On that day, El Chapo is seen pacing back and forth in his cell. Finally, he puts on his slippers and goes to the shower area. This is where he disappears from view, unbeknownst to the police. The most wanted criminal had just escaped. He was led through the tunnel by his associates, who had prepared a motorcycle for him to use to make his getaway. The motorcycle was equipped with a special track system that allowed it to move through the tunnel without making any noise. El Chapo rode the motorcycle through the tunnel, emerging on the other side in a location that was several miles away from the prison. He was met by his men, who had arranged for a car to take him to a safe location. It took the authorities a total of 40 minutes to realize that there hadn't been any movement inside the cell for a long time. When they realized he had escaped, they immediately began searching the surrounding areas looking for any sign of him. El Chapo's first stop was a safe house in the city Los Mochis in the state of Sinaloa. This was a familiar location for him, as he had lived there before and had many contacts in the area. He knew that the safe house was well guarded and that he could trust the people who lived there. For several months, El Chapo lived in hiding, moving from one safe house to another. He was careful to avoid any public places and keep a low profile, knowing that the authorities were searching for him. During this time, El Chapo continued to run his drug empire, using his network of associates and allies to smuggle drugs into the United States and other countries. He was determined to maintain his power and influence, even whilst hiding from authorities. However, the Mexican police were determined to catch El Chapo, and they launched a massive manhunt to track him down. They searched for him in every corner of the country, using intelligence gathered from informants and surveillance to track his movements. Finally, on January 8, 2016, the authorities received a tip that El Chapo was hiding in a safe house in Los Mochis. They started eavesdropping on the conversation and realized that the residents of the safe house were waiting for someone very important to arrive at the location. After confirmation that this person was indeed El Chapo, they quickly mobilized a team of federal police officers and special forces of the Mexican Marines to raid the location. The operation, codenamed Black Swan, was a culmination of months of intelligence gathering and surveillance by the authorities. But capturing him was not an easy feat. As the Marines approached the safe house, a fierce gun battle ensued, with El Chapo's men putting up fierce resistance. The Marines were met with a hail of gunfire from the safe house, and a Mexican Marine was wounded in the clash. El Chapo and his closest bodyguard, who had stolen a car to escape, fled the scene. Despite the resistance, the Marines managed to gain control of the safe house. 5 of El Chapo's associates were killed in the shootout. The authorities seized an impressive arsenal from the safe house, including 2 armored vehicles, 8 long guns, 1 handgun, and even a rocket-propelled grenade launcher. El Chapo and his bodyguard made a daring escape through the city's sewer system, with El Chapo running for a while before getting out and hijacking a car. They were eventually cornered at a love motel, where El Chapo was detained by security forces and taken to a motel room while the officers waited for backup. Up to that point, El Chapo thought he'd be rescued by his men, but as authorities approached the location, he knew he was going to go behind bars for a very long time. He was again extradited to Altiplano prison, but this time he was under even more surveillance. The Mexican authorities were constantly working on his extradition to the US as they knew this was the only solution. Meanwhile, El Chapo was also trying to communicate with his followers to arrange another escape. He was really scared of being taken to the US as he knew that it would be the end of his drug empire. The United States had previously requested that Mexico extradite El Chapo, and the process began shortly after his arrest. Mexico formally launched the extradition process on January 10, 2016. However, the extradition process was delayed due to various legal challenges and appeals. El Chapo's lawyers argued that he should be tried in Mexico first and that the United States was trying to circumvent Mexican law. The U.S. authorities refused to budge, stating that they would not accept any deals until El Chapo faced trial in the United States and pleaded guilty. On January 19, 2017, a Mexican judge issued an extradition order for El Chapo, and he was transferred to the United States. He was flown on a Mexican jet accompanied by DEA agents, medics, and mechanics from Ciudad Juarez, Mexico, to MacArthur Airport in Islip, Long Island, New York. The plane carrying El Chapo landed at MacArthur Airport after a 4-hour flight from Mexico. El Chapo was arraigned in U.S. District Court in Brooklyn, New York on January 20, 2017. He was initially held at a federal prison in New York City. In 2019, El Chapo was tried in the United States and convicted of multiple charges related to drug trafficking and organized crime. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. After his extradition, El Chapo was held at various federal prisons in the United States, including the ADX Florence Supermax prison in Colorado, the Alcatraz of the Rockies. He is housed in a 7-by-12-foot reinforced concrete cell with a small window that prevents prisoners from knowing the location of their cell. The cell is soundproof and tamper-proof, with all the furniture secured to the ground. Prisoners at ADX Florence spend 23 hours a day in their cells. They are allowed 1 hour a day outside in a small concrete courtyard covered in barbed wire, where they can exercise and get some fresh air. El Chapo is not even allowed to have any contact with other inmates, or even his own lawyers, except through a glass partition. Despite his attempts to escape and evade capture, El Chapo is now a prisoner, serving a life sentence for his crimes. His legacy as a powerful and feared drug lord is now a distant memory, replaced by the harsh reality of life in a maximum security prison.